Ahead of the Pack. By Jennifer Baljko. Sometimes you have to take a different route to get ahead of the pack. At least, that's what Spartan Corporation executives think. During the last several years, the mid-tier electronics manufacturing services company has looked for, and found, innovative ways to improve supply chain operations, trim expenses and keep its competitive edge. Want some evidence? The Jackson, Michigan, company has invested heavily in automating its procurement processes so that, today, about 70% of its purchases are triggered electronically to suppliers. It used prison inmates as a lower-cost labor option while it mulled over its longer-term domestic and international manufacturing strategy. It set up an international purchasing office in Singapore to take advantage of low-cost components and logistics services. But the story doesn't end there. Perhaps Spartan's most dramatic move to date is its pioneering decision to set up a 50,000 square foot manufacturing center in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. The investment is a first for a U.S.-based EMS provider in the country, according to Spartan. Instead of bowing to pressure to locate a plant in mainland China like hordes of its counterparts, Spartan took a different route to low-cost manufacturing. The attraction is not immediately obvious. Vietnam is still a communist country and, when compared with its more technology-centric neighbor to the north, it is not likely to be a huge contributor to the electronics market in the immediate future. But Spartan is banking on the potential. Low labor rates, a literate, English-speaking workforce and a Western style of doing business all helped win the company over. "There's more business going on in Vietnam than you think," said Spartan's Vice President of Corporate Materials Acquisition and Logistics Stephanie Martin. "My perceptions of Vietnam before my first visit were radically different from what we actually experienced. Most people are able to communicate in English, even on the streets. They are eager to do business with international companies. They have pride in their country and want to show their capabilities," she said. "They have buildings that are ready to move into. They have developed industrial parks that rival complexes you would see anywhere else in the world. And, because they were ruled by the French for so long, their government and business operations are similar to those in Europe." Vietnam's promise. Still, there are plenty of challenges in Vietnam, including a weak supply chain infrastructure, heavy dependence on agriculture and textile production, hurdles associated with state-owned transportation, telecommunication, energy and banking enterprises, and the lack of clear regulatory practices. Then there's the SARS health epidemic and the Asian currency crisis that swept through the region a few years ago. But Spartan is focusing on the promise of the future. Vietnam's GDP, which dipped below 5% year-over-year growth in 1999, has hovered at about 7% since 2000. Government and trade agencies anticipate similar growth rates for the next couple of years. Electronics and computer exports have increased from $585 million in 1999 to $685 million last year, and are targeted to climb steeply, to $60 billion, by 2010. Predicts the Vietnam General Statistical Office and the Vietnam Trade Office in the United States. The country, recovering from its war-ravaged image, is also slated to enter the World Trade Organization next year, a move that will give it greater credibility in the broader business community and align legislation with international trade law. Additionally, the government has embarked on efforts to attract greater foreign investment, ease tariff restrictions and loosen corporate development requirements. See story on page 25 for more information about Vietnam's business climate. If companies view it as a hospitable place, and the government can provide adequate infrastructure and ease restrictions for doing business there, there's no reason to think that Vietnam would not be a competitive place for manufacturers to consider, said Joe Abelson, Director of Emerging Markets at iSubly Corporation. Light bulb goes on. While Spartan may be an innovator, It's not impulsive. The decision to manufacture in Vietnam didn't happen overnight. It took a few years of research, several 25-hour-plus flights, lots of get-to-know-you meetings and layers of top management approval. It all started in early 2002 when two customers in the medical instrumentation and aerospace sectors came to Spartan looking for cost reductions and wanted to explore offshore manufacturing options, Martin recalled. One of the customers tested the markets, and, in late 2002, found that it could shave 15% to 40% off its costs by going abroad. Spartan had already done all it could domestically to cut expenses. It was working on automating purchasing transactions and had installed a uniform ERP backbone to reduce lag time. It had even outsourced a portion of its work to federal prison programs as a way to address labor wages. Visit the issue archives on www.myism.com and click on the June issue. But, to remain viable long-term in the cutthroat EMS market, Spartan knew eventually it would have to expand into Asia. It also knew China was not where it wanted to be. China was never on the table for us, said Martin. We didn't think our model was a fit for China. Language barriers and an intense focus on pushing out high-volume commodity devices made the popular destination unattractive to Spartan, she explained. Spartan operates a high product mix and has a low to medium volume manufacturing model that does not center on mass-produced consumer gadgets. Among others, it serves customers in the medical equipment sector and also has such proprietary products as digital compasses, battery monitoring systems and cable air pressure monitoring systems and transducers. During a dinner meeting with trading partners and colleagues, Vietnam was presented as an option, Martin said. In February 2003, Martin was in Ho Chi Minh City looking at industrial parks and high-tech economic development zones, talking with banking, trade and government representatives, and exploring the possibility of setting up a joint venture with a local company. Realizing that the business environment was more favorable than expected, Spartan chose to greenfield a factory on its own, Martin said. The decision, Spartan claims, makes the company the first U.S.-owned DMS provider in Vietnam. This April, the company's board of directors approved up to $7 million for building a 50,000 square foot facility in the Vietnam-Singapore Industrial Park in Ho Chi Minh City. It will house both manufacturing operations and engineering services for the newly formed Spartronics Incorporated, a wholly owned subsidiary headed by Jason Kraft, who was promoted from Director of Operations for Spartan's Brooksville, Florida, site to Vice President and Managing Director of the new division. Construction is underway, and the plant is scheduled to be up and running in January, working off the same model as Spartan's American facilities. Kraft said 50 to 75 workers would be employed there early next year, a number that could rise to 500 in 2 years. Semi-skilled operators earn $60 to $90 a month while engineers will make $130 to $150 a month, Martin added. Young people are flocking to the city to avoid poverty in the rural areas, Kraft said. We'll have access to these talented people, many of whom have engineering backgrounds. To acclimatize workers to its U.S. standards, Kraft said he is looking to set up an internal training school to assist with language translation, business process orientation and a general electronics overview. The quality of the products is extremely high, and they are very diligent, process-driven workers, Kraft said. To Spartan's advantage, what Vietnam workers bring to the tech market is a knack for box building and subassembly work, said Mark Zetter, president of Venture Outsource Group, a San Jose, California, firm that offers advisory services to OEMs and EMS providers. That is exactly the type of work that will be done in the Ho Chi Minh plant, Martin said. Vietnam does not have the depth and scope of technology skills and infrastructure yet to be a big player in the space. They are coming late to the party on that front, said Zetter. But, Vietnam does have a good wide box services market, which requires semi-knocked-down assembly work. This kind of work involves taking prefabricated printed circuit board assemblies and fitting the motherboards and wire harnesses into chassis, he said. Closing the loop. Construction of the Ho Chi Minh City factory is just one piece of Spartan's global expansion plans. Another significant part is its planned Asian supply chain network, said Martin. The biggest challenges facing the EMS provider are the less than desirable logistics and transportation routes into and out of Vietnam and the relatively weak presence of component suppliers and distributors. The supply chain structure is very weak in Vietnam. The distributors are not there, and most of the companies there buy from small mom-and-pop distributors that may not have a full line card, Martin said. Also, the freight channels are not that strong yet, and it's still expensive to move through those channels, Martin said. We knew we had to get the supply line in ahead of the factory. We're getting the pieces together now so that when the machines turn on in January, the pipeline for materials is already in place. To lessen the pain of complicated interregional supply chain activities, Spartan set up an international purchasing office in Singapore last December. The company hired a senior buyer who will be responsible for sourcing and purchasing products out of Asia and routing them to Vietnam, said Martin. Communicating through Spartan's internal network, the ERP backbone, email, phone and fax, the buyer will likely purchase about $5 million worth of materials annually. The majority of Spartan's direct materials are purchased electronically for its vendor-managed inventory programs, she added. Logistically, moving products from Singapore or Taiwan to Vietnam, in some cases, could be as expensive as shipping them directly from the United States, she said. Using Kuhn plus Nagel International AG as its primary freight forwarder and FedEx Corporation for small packages, Spartan has set up third-party logistics hubs in the United States, Singapore and Taiwan. Kuhn plus Nagel consolidates the shipments and sends packages to Vietnam twice a week. Since freight bills are calculated by weight, the consolidated pickups maximize the load and reduce the charges. With all these elements coming together, Martin is confident that Spartan is forging the way for other companies that might want to make a similar leap. Every time I go there, it reinforces to me that we are making the right decision, she said. The rest of the world will discover Vietnam in the next couple of years. This video was produced by CMB Marketing. Cross-Media Branding and Marketing. Article written by Jennifer Baljko. Thank you for watching.